Any money on you, get it out right now, put it on the table. Our speaker today is going to tell you show you how it disappears very quickly. Our speaker today is Brian Bush, who is a historian and is the historian at Perryville State Battlefield Park. He's a native of Louisville. He graduated from Murray State. And he has a master's degree in U of L, and you might recognize him from a number of smaller books that he's written about the Civil War and that type of thing. And if you know anything about Chuckaluck, Pharaoh, Keno, I know you think I'm talking dirty to you. He's going to tell you about those. And since it's appropriate, since we're in a law library and many people here are lawyers, even gamblers have lawyers, right?
Yes, they do.
So he's going to tell us about, I've actually forgotten the guy's name. I'll get it here in a minute. The lawyer for the gamblers, you'll have to tell us about it, then. I forgot who it was. Yeah, thank you for coming.
No problem. Well, thank you for having me today. As he mentioned, I am the manager for the Perryville Battlefield State Historic Site. If you haven't been there, please come out. We've done some major additions. If you haven't been in a while, we're up to 1,200 acres now. We own 90% of the battlefield. And of course, you may or may not know, we were the largest battle in the state of Kentucky during the Civil War and the bloodiest. We're only 5 hours long and we had almost 8,000 casualties. We have one man drop every 13 minutes. And we could get into all of that later, but you're here to learn about the gambling barons of Louisville. Now, just to let you know, I have written 17 books on the Civil War. You can find me in almost any bookstore. And this one was published, I guess we're going on 2 years now, and this was a lot of fun. You may say, well, how did it get started? How did you get in gambling? Because, folks, I do the lottery and that's about it. But these are games that I'd never even heard of before. And how I got interested, the Civil War. You got to keep in mind, in 1862, the Battle of Perryville was on October 8th of 1862. Before that army moved out of Louisville, there were 90,000 soldiers in this city. Just imagine that. They said everywhere, and from Louisville, from the river all the way up to Broadway, were just white tents as far as you could see. Now, during the early 1700s and early 1800s, stagecoaches and steamboats brought visitors to Louisville. The boarding houses and taverns along the wharf became areas where visitors could play poker, billiards, or faro. Now, a game of cards or dice could easily be played with very little setup. Professional gamblers, known as riverboat gamblers, I'll show you a picture of those in a second. There's a bustling port. This is in the 1850s.
And those pictures in the 1850s, they're west of here, correct?
Yeah, yeah, right down near the port, where around 2nd Street is really, right around that area, where the 2nd Street Wharf is. Now this is the Oakland House Race Course. We'll talk about that. That was a painting that was drawn in the 1840s. And here's your riverboat gamblers. These are documented riverboat gamblers, and that's what they look like. Look at the guy on the left, he's shady looking. Game of card, like I said, professional gamblers known as riverboat gamblers rode the steamboats on the Ohio River, and the stagecoaches also carried professional gamblers to the city. Now, early in the 19th century, lotteries gained popularity in the city, which were drawn at local taverns. Geez, what's old again is new again now. Schools, churches, relief funds, medical organizations, and the military used the lottery as a way to help their organizations raise money without paying taxes. Does this sound familiar? With vast amounts of money being raised, corruption occurred. No. And the citizens of Louisville began to protest the lotteries. By 1862, Kentucky was only one of 3 states in the Union with a statewide lottery, which was against the nationwide anti-lottery crusade that was going on. Now, horse racing began as early as 1815 at the Louisville Turf, which was located on 16th Street and next to the Hope Distillery. Now, during the mid-1820s, the Beargrass track was established near present-day Hurstbourne Parkway area. By 1832, the Oakland Racecourse, which we saw here, replaced the Louisville turf, which was located on 7th Street south of Magnolia Avenue. Betting on horse races was not a public affair at that time, and usually done with the upper echelons of the Southern elite. Bets were done by the horse owners or their friends or their servants, or occasionally the masters would send their slaves into town to do the bets for them. By the 1850s, horse racing was in decline, and the Oakland Racecourse closed during a recession. Now, during the 1850s, Louisville became a vibrant and very wealthy city. Louisville became the 10th largest city in the United States. Louisville became an important tobacco market and pork packing center. Now, the Louisville-New Orleans River route held top rank on the entire Western River system in the amount of freight and passenger traffic. Not only did Louisville profit from the river, but in Louisville in August of 1855, Louisville citizens greeted the arrival of the locomotive Hart County on 9th and Broadway. And the first passengers arrived by train on the Louisville and Frankfort Railroad. That was built by James Guthrie. Now, with the railroad, Louisville could manufacture furniture and export the goods to southern cities. Louisville was well on her way to becoming an industrialized city. Hemp was Kentucky's leading agricultural product from 1840 to 1860. My goodness, what was old is now new again. And Louisville was the nation's leading hemp market. Now, the steamboat route from Louisville to New Orleans held the top position, like I was mentioning, and Louisville to Cincinnati route was the most crowded and the most prestigious. By the late 1850s, railroads began to overtake the steamboats. Louisville had connections with Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Memphis, Vicksburg, New Orleans. A river ferry to Jeffersonville or New Albany connected with the rail lines extended to St. Louis, to east of Pittsburgh, and then north to the Great Lakes. When Louisville connected with with Nashville, Louisville became what was known as the gateway to the South. On April 12th of 1861, the Civil War began when Confederate General Pierre Gustave Toussaint-Beauregard fired upon Fort Sumter in the Charleston, South Carolina harbor. Union regiments continued to flow into the city when war was declared. And by January 1st of 1862, Louisville had 80,000 Union troops throughout the city. By March 1st of 1862, 28 regiments camped around this city. On October 2nd of 1862, the Union Army marched out of Louisville with 60,000 men. On October 8th of 1862, the largest battle in the state of Kentucky would be fought at Perryville, resulting in over 8,000 casualties. Confederate General Braxton Bragg, commander of the Army of the Mississippi at the battle, and Confederate General Edmund Kirby Smith, who was commander of the Department of East Tennessee in Louisville, left the state never to return. So Kentucky would stay in Union hands for the rest of the war. After the Battle of Perryville, soldiers continued to occupy the city. When the war ended in April of 1865, the Union Army began to disband. During June of 1865, 96,000 troops and 8,889 animals left Washington, D.C. and headed for the Ohio Valley, where 70,000 soldiers took steamboats to Louisville and the remainder embarked for St. Louis and Cincinnati. The troops boarded 92 steamboats at Parksburg and descended the river in convoys of 8 boats to the sounds of cheering crowds and booming cannons saluting at every port. Some of the soldiers received several months of back pay. With Union soldiers' pockets bulging with federal money, the city experienced an economic boom. With hundreds of thousands of soldiers occupying Louisville during the Civil War, young men had money in their pockets to spend in the city, which included restaurants, hotels, and of course, gambling houses. Gambling, as one author, I'll quote it, said, burned into a fever that seemed all-consuming during the Civil War. There were just enough gambling houses with enough patrons and free money to keep them open day and night. The poor as well as the rich played at the tables. Many professional riverboat gamblers reaped a fortune from the Army officers and Army contractors who stayed in the city. Now, of course, every gentleman that was in Louisville at that time, you better believe you wore one of these. That was a Derringer. That's an 1860 Derringer. And you carried a knife on you. This is actually an original lottery ticket from the state of Kentucky that was issued on May 5th of 1863. And there's the troops coming in on Louisville in steamboats all across the river. The famous poet Walt Whitman actually arrived in the city when he was a soldier. Come on, catch up. There we go. Here's your typical soldiers. Look what's in their one hand and look what's in the other. Liquor and cards. Catch up. Come on.
Now, would they, while you're looking, would they pay for those pictures? Would they like order them and they'd come back 3 weeks later?
No, they would pay for them immediately. The guy would go back in his little portable studio and then develop the pictures immediately. And they would pay, some of these were quite a lot of money. Typical soldier paid between $1 to $5. That was a lot of money back then. And it even cost you more if you want them hand tinted. There we go. There's your soldiers playing the game of Chuck-a-Luck. I can explain a little bit later. Here's a bunch of them playing Keno. Of course, that's made a comeback again. And here's them playing Pharaoh. And this is an original ad from 1859 and 1862 showing the Woodland Race Course. I'll get more into that in a little bit. You know, at Kentucky Derby, they give that award away for the winner of the Kentucky Derby every year. That's from the Woodland Race Course. They've been remaking that award every single year for the Kentucky Derby. When the Civil War broke out, the Woodland Race Course actually dug a hole and buried that. Wow. So the Union soldiers wouldn't find it. Now, all of the north side of Jefferson Street from 4th to 5th Street and all the east side of 5th from Jefferson to Market and practically all the south side of Market from 5th to 4th Street was devoted almost exclusively to Keno, roulette, faro, and Chuck-a-Luck. The doors in the gambling casinos and saloons had no locks because they never closed. During the Civil War, gambling houses were packed with Union, believe it or not, Confederate officers and men who profited from the war contracts. Soldiers during the Civil War in Louisville also played Keno and roulette and American roulette. During the 1860 and 1861, the Woodland Race Course, which was situated 6 miles east of the city, held both spring and fall meets, offering purses between $200 and $500, which is equivalent to $6,000 to $16,000 today. The purses paid at the Woodland Race Course were uncommonly large for the period, and many horses from the surrounding states were brought to Louisville to compete for these prizes. Now that's the Louisville Jockey Club right there. After the Civil War, steamboats and railroads became a major part of the city's economy. During the Gilded Age, which lasted from about 1870 to 1900, by the way, I wrote a book on the Gilded Age in Louisville too, hint, hint. Louisville became an important city in industry, trade, and commerce. Louisville had the introduction of new railroads, the extension of old ones, bridging the Ohio River, the improvement of the Portland Canal, and of river navigation, the introduction of modern methods in every sector of business life, the erection of buildings devoted to commerce, manufactures, and domestic purposes were all contributing factors in Louisville becoming an industrial city. Louisville's top products in industry, trade, and commerce were tobacco and whiskey bourbon. Other top industry were plows. To feed the South and the West needs for new technology and farming, Louisville became the largest manufacturer of plows in the world. With the advent of railroads, Louisville had a cheap and easy communication with all the important points on the continent. Louisville had connections with the north, the south, the west, and seaboard cities. In 1885, the Louisville National Railroad had control over 2,000 miles of track and transported over 569,000 people a year. Just keep these numbers rolling in your heads and this money coming into the city. Well, steamboats and railroads brought passengers from all over the country to Louisville, which continued to expand our gambling houses. With the newfound wealth in Louisville, wealthy industrialists and financiers were able to indulge in the ever-expanding gambling houses. There were grand gambling palaces, which were furnished with black oak and velvet furnishings, where only the elite gentlemen were allowed to play high-stakes games. Even the average man could play at sawdust pavilions, where anyone's money could play. After the Civil War, racehorsing re-emerged, and with the abolition of slavery, the game changed from a game for the wealthy aristocracy of the South and changed it into a game of gambling for everyone to participate in. In 1874, the Louisville Jockey Club was organized at Churchill Downs, and the first meeting of the board of directors was held on October 2nd of 1874. The president was Colonel Meriwether Lewis Clark. The first Kentucky Derby was run on May 17th of 1875 and conducted the first running of the new stakes race. The Kentucky Derby was the showplace of the new approach to horse racing. A $1,000 purse was given to the winner of the 3-year-olds. An opening day on May 17th, 1875, over 10,000 people attended this new track, which was the largest for any opening of a new track or the first running of a new stakes race. Aristides won the first Kentucky Derby. In the spring of 1895, the first Derby race took part in the new Jockey Club. Early trackside betting at Churchill Downs changed from auction pools to bookmakers to pari-mutuel machines. A pari-mutuel machine is a machine for performing calculations automatically. A pari-mutuel betting is a betting system in which all the bets of a particular type are placed together in a pool in which the taxes, and of course the house take, or vigorish, was deducted, and payoff odds are calculated by sharing the pool among the winning bets. The large amount of calculations involved in the system led to the invention of a specialized calculating machine known as a totalizator, automatic totalizator, or tote board. By 1908, bookmakers became illegal. Colonel Meriwether Lewis Clark, the founder of Churchill Downs, imported the pari-mutuel machines from France to Churchill Downs to eliminate dishonest bookkeepers. Now, Kentucky was the first state to legalize the new betting machine, and Louisville made the first American-made pari-mutuel device, which was produced by Charles Granger Iron Foundry. Now, during the golden age of gambling in Louisville, all of the north side of Jefferson Street from 4th to 5th, all of the east side from 5th to Jefferson to Market, and almost all the west side of Market Street from 5th to 4th Streets were gambling houses. The businesses were such names as the Richmond, located at 5th and Market on the southwest corner, which was a Faro Bank, the headquarters, which was a Faro Bank located near Market Street between 4th and 5th Streets, number 80, which was located on 5th Street near Market, the bank, which was located at Jefferson Street near Guthrie Street, number 27 on West Jefferson, number 161 was on 4th and 5th and Jefferson, in the Crystal Palace, the Old Kentucky Club located below the Knickerbocker on Jefferson Street was a Keno House, number 102, which was located near 5th Street, and the Silver Lake, which was located on Jefferson Street between 4th and 5th Streets. Nearly every corner in the city's central district had a gambling hall, and the old Green Street, now Liberty Street, contained rows of gambling houses. During that time, Faro, Keno, and Chuckaluck and roulette were the most popular games, with Faro banks and Chuckaluck games being played by devoted followers. During the early 1880s, the first crap game in Louisville was played by African Americans at 10th and Broadway, which was owned by Bill Mann. Several years later, white residents began to play the game, and soon most of the gambling houses in Louisville were playing the game of craps. From 1860 to 1885, there were 18 gambling houses in the city, along with smaller game rooms which were run by the hotels. Two of the most popular gambling houses were the Beargrass Club, located on the south side of Jefferson Street between 4th and 5th, and the Officer Club, which was located on Main Street between 4th and 5th Streets. The Beargrass Club was frequented by only the wealthiest and most prominent men of Louisville and the surrounding area, along with the wealthy and social elite from other sections of the state who happened to be visiting the city. The stakes were the highest pay of any gambling houses in America, except for New Orleans. Greeting the visitors to the Beargrass Club and the Officers Club were handsomely dressed footmen to assist the visitors and keep out the undesirables. The Officer Club was for the military officers, although the club did allow patrons who were fortunate enough to have admission cards. Now, the social status and the ability to pay the dealer were the conditions of the membership to these exclusive clubs. The Shades Gambling House was located on the southwest corner of 4th and Green, now Liberty, and the Hotel de Reims on Main Street between 3rd and 4th Streets were ranked just below the Beargrass and Officers Club. Two Englishmen, one of them by the name of English Billy, aka William Reynolds, made their fortunes by running the Union blockade during the Civil War with Southern cotton intended for English markets, and after the Civil War, he opened up a place called the Idle Hour, which was located on the south side of Main Street between 3rd and 4th Street. Reynolds personally banked every one of his games. Their gambling halls rivaled the salons of a Turkish sultan, as was quoted in the paper. African American waiters served the choicest of drinks and the most elegant of foods. There were luxurious lounging rooms and smoking rooms, and the players sat in large leather chairs in front of tables made from the finest mahogany. The play had no limit. Unfortunately, the Idle Hour lasted only a short time due to losses of $1.2 million in 18 months, which was the equivalent of $29 million today. Basically what ended up happening, the professional gamblers came in and wiped him out. Now, the Walker's Exchange ran for about 10 years and was located on the west side of 3rd Street between Main and Market. Gold passed across the tables every day. Many of the gambling houses had saloons downstairs, with the games being played on 2nd or 3rd floors, or sometimes even both. In 1879, Edward Hughes, who was the Louisville Fire Department chief at the time, and James Dick Watts bought Walker's Exchange. They added a pool room, and I'm not talking about this pool, I'm talking like pooling your bets, and changed the name to the Turf Exchange. The firm was known now as the J.R. Watson Company. It was ranked one of the most popular pool sellers in the country. Some of the heaviest plungers, also known as gamblers, in the country sat listening to auctioneers such as Bob Cathart and Joe Burt. In one season, the pools generated $1.5 million, which is the equivalent of around $29 million today. The house made over $100,000. That's equivalent to $2 million today in profits. The firm became known as Hughes, Cathart and Company. In 1883, Watts left the firm and the company became known as Hughes and Cathart. In 1886, Hughes and Watts sold the building to Henry Weymouth and Amelia Boulier, who combined the Turf Exchange and the Jockey Club pool rooms and kept the name of the Turf Exchange. Now, Amelia Boulier started the Louisville Jockey Club pool rooms. Eventually, Boulier closed the Jockey Club because of the laws that were passed against gambling. The business continued to operate as an auction selling pools in New Orleans, horse races. The turf exchange ran until about 1906 when raids put a stop to the illegal activity. James Dick Watts, owner of the Crockford, which was one of the most spectacular of all the gambling houses in the city. The gambling house was located on the south side of Jefferson Street below 4th Street and had 3 two-story buildings with a large courtyard in the center. The building's previous owner was Anderson Waddell, who was the most famous of all the gamblers in this city. When Waddell left Louisville, he settled in Nashville, Tennessee, and sold the business to Watts for a fortune. Watts made back all the money he had spent on buying the business. Riverboat gamblers who played among the passengers on steamboats between Louisville and New Orleans traveled to Louisville, and each Saturday night a crowd of riverboat gamblers walked into the Crockford to match their skills against each other. The gamblers played only stud poker, and the bets could be high as $75,000. That's equivalent to $2 million. Can you imagine that? Throwing down $2 million on the table. And they were stacked high. Watts' business became so popular that in 1872, he had expanded his business and built a Keno gambling casino, which was comprised of 3 stories. In July of 1885, the Palace Royale was raided and the gambling furniture was removed. On August 25th of 1885, Watts Casino was raided and his manager, Captain C.S. Jenks, was arrested and paid a $600 fine. And all the gambling equipment was taken out. In September of 1885, the famous Keno Casino Palace Royale was raided again and the equipment again removed. In the late 1860s, infamous gambler Anderson Waddell owned the Crockford. Soon after, Colonel Anderson Waddell was one of the wealthiest players of the gamblers in the city, took an interest in business and bought 1/3 and opened his business on the 2nd story. The Crockford played the game of faro exclusively, and the center of the courtyard was where a player could play 4 games at once, such as faro, roulette, faro bank, and chuck-a-luck. In the 1860s and 1870s, gambling was at the peak in the city. Early in the 1880s, Churchill Downs had 1 week in the spring and 1 week in the fall for racing, and the event drew people from all over the country, and the great gambling houses such as the Crockford hosted the visitors. During the races, faro was at the game's height. Colonel Waddell placed Eli Marks and Black Dent in charge of the games. In 1877, the first pool room was Parmelle's, which opened on 4th near Market, where only auctions and mutuals were sold. The first big pool room in Louisville was opened by Waddell and Joe Burt on 3rd Street between Main and Market. And a single bet of $10,000, that's equivalent to $290,000 now, could be waged on a horse race. Pool rooms were a method of gambling which all many bet on the result of a particular event by a number of people was awarded to one or more winners according to conditions established in advance, and other charges may be deducted from the total pool before the prizes were awarded. See, folks, the only place that makes money is the house itself. Pool selling was introduced in the 19th century, and the pool method of dividing the wager totaled between the winners spread to practically every country in the world and formed the rational basis for running nearly all modern lotteries, as well as most organized betting on horse racing and other professional sports. In 1869, Major Ed Hughes and James Dick Watts bought the Walkers in exchange, and in 1876 changed the name to the Turf Exchange. The Turf Exchange was under the name of Hughes and Watts and Cathart. Now, the Turf Exchange and the New Market were the 2 houses where local bettors could bet thousands of dollars on a horse race. 2 houses had a monopoly on the turf betting in the city. Waddell's cashier was a young man named Madison Kywin, who became Kentucky's greatest poet. Bob Gray, operator of the famous gambling house at Roofer's Hotel, which I saw you a picture earlier of, on 5th Street near Market, was known for their hospitality and really high stakes. During the golden days of gambling houses in Louisville, there were several hundred buildings used exclusively for gambling. Some other gambling houses, like I mentioned, the Palace Royale. There was the Pearl, which was located on the northeast corner of 4th and Liberty, which was on the corner opposite the old Opera House. The Pearl was one of the first Civil War establishments opened by James Cornell. The Richmond Hotel was located on 5th and Market. The Riders Hotel was located on Gray Street. Phil German's Hotel was catered only to private games. Even the famous Galt House had the Southern Club and was open only to private high-end poker dealers. The Silver Lake was located on near the Masonic Temple on 4th Street and was another one of the gambling casinos. By 1885, Louisville was known as the City of Gamblers, the Gamblers' Paradise, or the Monaco of America. Nowhere else in the South or West short of the Pacific Coast were there so many transactions being done. There was no place in America where gambling of all kinds was carried out more openly than there was in Kentucky. For 3 square blocks on 5th Street and 4 square blocks on Jefferson, nearly every house was filled with keno rooms or faro banks. There were lottery shops, keno, faro, poker rooms. The Jockey Club had the finest track in the South and brought thousands of visitors, with thousands of dollars changed hands in that single day. James Dick Watts, who was one of the owners of the Turf Exchange, took bets by telegraph and had French mutuals and pool selling, and his sales amounted, get a load of this, to $6 to $7 million, which is equivalent to $180 million today. 4th Street became the handsomest street in the South. The Crockford had magnificent pictures on the walls, rich curtains in the windows, and the floors were covered with soft piled Brussels carpets. Faro was dealt on inlaid tables of expensive wood, and luxurious chairs were around the tables. Louisville gamblers were betting more recklessly than any other American or European city at that time. A number of small gambling houses, or hells as they were called, were common in the city, with rows of half-dozen houses which were always packed. Major Ed Hughes made a fortune from the Turf Exchange and the Crockford and owned $100,000 in real estate. Now, Phil Hinkle had 2 keno houses, although he was primarily a saloon keeper. Major Ed Hughes and James Dick Watts were reckless players at their own games, and Watts once lost $15,000 in one hand. That's equivalent to $280,000 today. In 1885, Anderson Waddell was one of the wealthiest gamblers in Louisville and owned half the interest in the Crockford and controlled 4 to 5 establishments. You may ask yourself, well, gee, we're on a roll, folks. What happened? Well, what finally brought an end to gambling in Louisville was a series of laws. Here you go, lawyers. The first of the attacks on the gamblers was in 1876, when the grand jury indicted several gamblers and levied fines against those who owned tipping or disorderly houses, especially those faro banks. On July 1st of 1885, every gambling house in the city of Louisville was raided. We had an organization called the Law and Order Club, and issued warrants to seize all gambling equipment at J.H. Devitt and Company at the Billiard Salon at 336 on Liberty Street. Frank Beck and John Spanier had a keno house at 248 West Jefferson and was raided over the Paradise Salon. The Palace Royale was raided and arrested C.F. Jenkins. Doors were broken down at the Palace Royale. The police wagons were full of gambling tools, furniture, and faro layouts. In August of 1885, the Law and Order Club ordered the police to invade the Keno Bank at Jesse Hammond on 336 Liberty and the Palace Royale at 4th and Jefferson, and all the furniture was again taken out of the buildings. Chief John Whalen, was ironic because he owned a gambling house, personally led the police on the raid. Jesse Hammond was arrested, and the goose balls, chips, tables, every piece of furniture were put on wagons and hauled away. An arrest warrant was issued for Captain C.S. Jenks at the Palace Royale. When the police raided his gambling house, Colonel James Dick Watts came to the door and asked the officers, "What the heck were you doing here at this time of the night?" He offered to go down to the central station along with Captain Jenks. Bond was set for Jenks at $600, and Watts paid the bond in cash right on site, and Jenks was released. The Palace Royale had been only open for 2 months at the time. In November and December of 1885, 35 gamblers were convicted and sentenced to 47 months in prison and a $16,000 fine, which was the severest penalty inflicted in any state in the United States for gambling. In 1886, the Law and Order Club, ordered Emile Bouillet to close his pool rooms on 3rd Street and stop selling of pools on horses. The Law and Order Club, passed the gambling bill, essentially closing all the pool rooms in the city. John Baskin, who was the attorney for the Law and Order Club, stated the organization planned to stop all betting, auction pools, combinations, pari-mutuels, and attack at all forms of gambling. The Law and Order Club waged war on the pool sellers and the gamblers. Louisville Mayor Henry S. Tyler issued the order to close all the gambling houses in the city. By the 1920s, Prohibition brought an end to alcohol sales, and with that, the end of saloons, and with that came the end to gambling. Now, in 1910, the Churchmen's Federation led the way in the progressive movement in combating immorality in this city. The Churchmen's Federation led the Kentucky Anti-Racetrack Gambling Commission, and in 1923 became the platform for the Democratic Party. In 1927, the progressive anti-gambling movement came to an end. Republican Flem Sampson won the popular vote. And I do own this coin. This is from the Idle Hour. Good for 2.5 cents. This is Colonel Richard Dick Watts. The reason why he's called Colonel Richard Dick Watts, because he was a colonel in the Union Army. He's buried at Cave Hill Cemetery. He was commander of the 27th Kentucky Union Infantry. And this is Colonel Jack Chin. No, he didn't serve in any military, but Colonel Jack Chin, he was originally from Harrodsburg, Kentucky. He had a huge plantation in Harrodsburg. And the reason why I mentioned him in my book, what I'll do is get into more deeply into all these guys I was talking about and where they got their starts. Colonel Jack Chin, he had a Derby winner, which was called Leonidas. In one of the Kentucky Derbies, he raised and bred horses, but he also gambled. He gambled like crazy. And he made a small fortune from gambling, especially on horses. I'll show you a picture here. Of course, you know, the only governor to be executed in this state was William Goebel.
Well, assassinated, not executed.
Yeah, he was assassinated, yes. He was assassinated. We never have found who assassinated him. But kind of funny, the gentleman on the left, that is actually Colonel George Chin. George Chin was a good friend of Mr. Goebel. And he actually helped Goebel win the election. And he was with him when he was shot in Frankfurt at the old state capitol. And everybody thought he was a security guard because Chin always carried a derringer on him and a Bowie knife. So he was always ready. He had that 9-inch blade always tucked in his back belt. And that's just one of the stories that I touch on with Dick Watts, but I encourage you to get the book. You'll learn more about these guys, and I actually go into detail on how these games were played and how they were betted. So again, thank you so much for inviting me today, and if y'all have any questions, just feel free to ask. Yes, sir. We'll go with you first.
Yeah, were there any social ills that were coming about as a result of all this gambling? I know the morality club came along, but was it tied to anything? Were there lots of fights or duels or anything else going on?
Oh yeah, with gambling and liquor, the two combinations, you're going to have fights. I mean, even in Louisville, during the Civil War, I mean, there's a famous story. I mentioned this in my Louisville during the Civil War history guide there. At one of the theaters here, the Masonic Theater, they were having one of these things where, you know, the dastardly villain with the mustache curled up and the the woman, you know, being evilly treated by him. Well, some of the Union soldiers had a little bit too much liquor, and they start shooting at the actor. So at one point during the Civil War, they had the provost guards that were here in the city and actually shut down all the liquor shops that were selling liquor to the soldiers. Said no more of that. So, and then, yeah, anytime with gambling and liquor, what comes along with it? Prostitution. So, yeah, it was all, and of course, you know, God forbid that you were gambling on a Sunday, you know, that all got interplayed into it with the Law and Order Club. Yep.
I know you had mentioned some of the different factors, but why do you think that it was Louisville in particular that became such like a hub on the East Coast versus like other cities that had Union soldiers and money flowing in after the war?
Well, you got to keep in mind, up north from all these different cities, from like Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, they had to filter in, because you got to keep in mind, even in the 1860s, there was no bridge that connected Ohio to Kentucky or Indiana to Kentucky. You had to literally take it by ferry. And that became a problem when you're trying to filter all these soldiers in, because once they get into Louisville, they would board the Louisville-Nashville train and then go into Nashville and then fan out across the South during the war. So even like during the 1862 campaign that I mentioned, there are drawings that we have where literally they strapped together barges, put together plank boards across it so the armies could march across. Now James Guthrie, he's known as Mr. Louisville. There's actually a sign down here on Guthrie Street talking about him. He is the founder of the Louisville-Nashville Railroad, and once the bridge was completed in 1870, that opened up everybody, the East Coast with their trains coming in from, you know, Cincinnati area. Now the Cincinnati area could connect to Louisville, and then Louisville it could connect all the way to New Orleans by the 1880s. There was a famous route. I don't know if you ever heard of it before, but those railroad fanatics out here, you may have heard this one. It's called the Queen and Crescent route, and the Queen referred to Cincinnati. The Crescent is New Orleans. And that was a route that traveled there. It began about 1920 and ran all the way until about 1940. So yeah, once the railroads all interconnected at Louisville, then it was just mass expanding across the country, east, west, north, and south. And steamboats, I mean, as you see, look what we got going now. The Portland Canal moves millions of dollars worth of freight every day going through the Portland Canal. So that still is a factor, but your railroads is a major factor that opens this area up and why we become a hub. There used to be a sign, you can see old photographs of where it used to be a big sign on the river that said Gateway to the South.
I remember it. What was the name of that bridge that you're talking about? The first bridge that was built?
It was the
across-
railroad bridge.
The K&I?
Yeah, the
The
K&I.
one that's been closed since the 1970s?
Mhm.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
walking bridge, the one that they turned into
That
the walking
was-
bridge?
No.
No.
West, west, okay.
Yeah.
22nd.
So how did you play Pharaoh?
Faro is basically where you put bets on numbers, and there's a certain set of numbers, and then you had a cage, and you would rotate it, and then you pick that number. And if that number was on that color and that number corresponding to the ball, then you would win that bet.
Okay. Even odds or?
Odds and evens, yeah.
No. Even like if I bet $1, am I getting $1 back, or am I getting $5?
You're
or-
getting $1.50 back. Yep,
So if I bet $1,
you get $1.50 back. Or if you
so I'm
wanted to
only,
do the
so I'm
pool,
only making 50 cents, or am I making $1.50 and keeping my $1?
yeah, you're keeping your dollar and making $1.50.
Okay.
And then if you got guys that came in together and would put a pool on it and put it on that one number, that if that one number won, then you won what was in that pot, and then you divided it up among each other. Yeah.
So at our peak, we were the 10th largest city in the United States. Is
Mhm.
it prohibition that derailed us? Why did we keep pace?
Yeah.
Other cities were starting to take off, and once the railroads started connecting all with each other, other cities started becoming big, like St. Louis and Cincinnati even though Cincinnati was as big as us at one point.
So was it leadership, or what was the deal?
Combination of everything with the economy. You gotta keep in mind, there was a major financial disaster in 1876. Some of you may have heard of the ship, the CSS, or the USS, no it is, yeah, CSS California.
Sinks with all the gold.
And all the gold. All that gold was being transferred to California. It was supposed to go around, then come back up to the east and distribute the money out to banks to carry the banks, because they were trying to rebuild the South. And when that ship was lost, all that gold that was going to these banks, boom, it just crashed the banks. And yeah, then of course, you got the Great Depression. That really hit the city hard. And then of course, we get in the 1970s where you now have expressways and people are just out of the city going into the suburbs. You know, we're trying to make it a revitalization back into the city, you know, with building apartments here and condos, but I don't think it'll ever return to what we had back in the 1800s. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was out near Westport Road and I saw that sign that said former Oakland Park. How many years did you say that existed?
It functioned before the Civil War, all the way up until the Civil War, and actually, unfortunately, the Civil War just wrecked it. Civil War soldiers actually set up camps right on the Oakland racetrack itself, and he just went bankrupt.
What's on the Oakland race course now, or do you know?
I've been by there, it's just houses, subdivisions, yeah. All that's left is that marker telling you where it was.
Aren't they confusing Oakland and Woodlawn? You're talking about Woodlawn out Westport Road. Oakland is here at 7th.
Yeah, on
Magnolia.
7th, yeah, 7th of Magnolia. Yeah, it's just a warehouse there now.
So you mentioned that the Union and Confederate people played together in the gambling houses?
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I mean, officers would be taken here. We did have a prisoner of war camp in Louisville. It was right where Liberty Street is, back then Green Street. And they got passes, the officers got passes to just mingle around the city, and they promised they'd go back, and it was really bizarre. I have, in our collection at Perryville, we have a beautiful albumen, which is an early card photograph of Colonel William Preston Johnston. He's buried in Cave Hill. He's from Louisville. His father was Albert Sidney Johnston, who was the highest ranking Confederate general to be killed during the Civil War. He was killed at Shiloh. His son, Colonel William Preston Johnson, ended up being Jefferson Davis' personal aide towards the end of the war. He was actually captured with Davis. He's got a fascinating career in and of itself. I mean, William Preston Johnson, after the war, he was asked by somebody who never heard of, Robert E. Lee, and asked him would he help run Washington and Lee University. And then once he started running Washington Lee University, he said, you know, we're starting up a new university in the South, and we'd like you to become president of it. And it was Tulane. He becomes the first president of Tulane University. But yeah, I've got a picture of him. It was taken in Louisville, and he's in full Confederate regalia. Go figure. I guess if you have enough money and clout, you know. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That
you all
was
for
great.
having me.
If selling your books, or if people want to buy your book, what can they do?
You can go to any bookstore in Louisville, they sell them, or you can go to, I've got three different book publishing companies. That's the most popular ones, is from the History Press.
Right, I guess you get this online through the History Press, yeah.
Or you can get it on Amazon, they sell them on there.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, the book is worth reading. It really is. It's a fantastic book. Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Thank you all for
Thanks for
coming.
having me.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot. Thank you.